We're out on the Recruiting Roadshow brought to you by Greenhouse, where we're talking with talent acquisition leaders and recruiting operations professionals about the problems keeping us up at night. This next conversation is very special for me because I'm about to sit down with Julianne Streff. Juju is my yoga teacher and a fellow recruiter and friend of mine here in Denver. When I think about showing up with authenticity and being our best selves at work, Julianne has the experience that many recruiters dream of, scaling a company from startup to IPO. And what she doubles down on might surprise you about how to scale recruiting. It's all about hiring manager conviction and creating confidence in the process. So enjoy this conversation with Julianne. How do recruiters instill confidence in candidates? How do recruiters instill confidence in hiring managers? How do we rely on the systems to get the best signal possible so that we can confidently move forward with people that are as equally as excited about the role as the hiring team is excited about them? And I think that's the needle to thread.
I think it's not necessarily profound, but I really think it's listening and dot connecting. I mean, if you listen to a hiring manager talk about what they want and then what they don't say, listen like between their words, I think you can gain a great picture of what they're looking for. And then you talk to a candidate and same thing, like the more time you take to understand someone and not just how they fit into your rec, but who they are as a human and what's motivating them. And even like if you talk to them about the interview process, for instance, they might open up and say, look, I'm going to do a lot better in that interview process. That's not whiteboarding. It's just conversation because hey, by the way, I'm neurodivergent. Like those kinds of things naturally and organically come up. I think the more comfortable you make people feel. How do you make them feel comfortable? I think you're there, like in the room. Not physically, but like body language. You're looking at them. You're smiling. You're giving them affirmation the way, like through how you react to what they say. I mean, again, it's kind of the basics of human interaction, but you have to nail the basics. And that's how you build that trust and that confidence. And I think too, having empathy, whether you've experienced the things that they end up ultimately sharing with you or not, allows you again to like build that comfort with them and that trust and respond in a way that's going to make them feel relieved that they shared that and not be thinking later, 3 hours later, like, oh shoot, should I not have opened up that much? Because I think there is a balance. Like sometimes candidates will feel so safe in front of, say, a hiring manager in an interview and then accidentally divulge something that maybe they regret later. But the recruiter's job is to create that safe space and then do something productive with that information, I think, within the permissions of the conversations that you've had, right? Like if someone says, for instance, we're talking about neurodiversity here, like if someone says openly and publicly that they identify that way and they're comfortable sharing it, then like it probably behooves you to tell the hiring manager who also said that they are neurodivergent, that there's a connection there and they're going to be able to build that rapport with them that much faster. And I think get them to shake off the nerves and the dust in a way that helps them really show up in an interview process and a hiring process. Because everyone's nervous going into an interview for the most part anyways. Building that confidence and that trust through how you acknowledge, see, and receive an individual, I just think goes so far.
When I think about instilling confidence, even the hiring manager could be nervous. They could be thinking about a million things.
Sure.
I always try to think about like, what does the hiring manager's day look like? What number meeting am I teeing up that interview for within their day? How do we provide them with the tools and resources, even the automation and the communication pathways so that they feel prepared? There's a level of expectation that hiring managers develop confidence so that they can be on their game in the time that they have with the candidate, whether it's 30, 45, 60 minutes in that first screen. How do you think about instilling confidence in hiring managers so that they're best equipped to make that human connection?
I think about an organization I worked at in the past, it's like a founding recruiter role, no structure, making no assumptions about what they know or don't know or how it's gone in the past, using the data that you have as a recruiter to know what does make a good process and then equip them with those tools and making it central, easy to find, easy to locate, easy to replicate so that it's scalable and consistent. And I know that changes as a company grows in size. What's scalable in the beginning or what's effective in the beginning may not scale over time, but it's giving them the tools and then coaching them on the tools. It's like with anything, if you do the upfront work, if you spend the 60 minutes upfront doing it, it's going to behoove everyone. It's going to save everyone time in the end. And similarly, the organizations that say, hey, spend 30 minutes before the interview reading their resume, understanding where they come from, look at the notes from the prior interviews, look at the focus for this, the scorecard for this role. Why waste your time on stuff that people have already talked about? And also from an employer branding standpoint, why waste the candidate's time asking them to repeat themselves? I like doing my homework and I like instilling that in others because I think at the end of the day, everyone benefits, everyone wins, whether you're the candidate, the hiring manager, or the recruiter.
I really appreciate your commitment to candidate experience, the way you think about employer brand being rooted in interactions. And when you think about the importance of employer brand, how do you think candidates are discovering companies through those same tools like Claude or ChatGPT?
I think if they want to be really efficient with their time, asking it to compile the top feedback from the likes of Glassdoor, of Reddit, of Google reviews, and prompt it to give them a summarized version from those websites. Because, hey, look, like back in the day, if you would have asked me to pick out a restaurant for the group of friends, like I am going to Yelp and maybe Reddit and maybe Google. Same thing with people preparing for interviews today. Like they want to have sentiment from various locations. And, one might argue that Glassdoor is the place people go when they're disgruntled. And Google is going to be inherently more positive because your name's attached to it. So why not, use ChatGPT or whichever tool to pull from all of those sources and summarize the general sentiment, the pros and the cons that people are saying over and over consistently on these websites. I think that's a great way to find out about culture. I think some people are comfortable reaching out and saying like, hey, I have an interview on LinkedIn. I have an interview at your company this week. What can you tell me? It looks like maybe we'd be peers. I do think that there are people who do that, but I think that's an exception, not a rule, or less common. But I think that's an interesting way to think about it too. And to be honest, I have done that before and I have gotten feedback that basically said, don't do it. Don't come to this organization. Preparing for an interview with AI in a way that curates and summarizes information so you're not spending time looking at all of these pages is a great way to, get the most bang for your buck.
When I think about the gift that recruiters are afforded to curate amazing candidate experience that translates the employer brand into a tangible human connection, that is the balance of technology and human judgment. Automation cannot instill that same feeling that I see recruiters do day in, day out. But how do you balance what should be automated and what should be left for human judgment?
I think that there's a lot of automation of screening going on right now. I think it's interesting. Like, I think there is a way to do it right, but I think it misses the opportunity to account for things that only a human can read effectively. When I think about automating in the hiring process, like starting at the application process or the resume review process, I think that it's cool when you can use AI to say, I think this person is a good match for these reasons, but they might not be for these reasons, and then prompt it to kind of help you through that. When you're like looking at applications or resumes or LinkedIn profiles, there could be a good and effective tag team situation going on there. But, we also know that AI is probably not going to be as good at seeing like, oh, this person took a career break because they had this traumatic event or a family thing going on, or they were raising their kids or what have you. I'm not confident that it's able to make a judgment on someone based on those pieces that humans are much better equipped to decide on. But I do like it for sourcing, and I like it for reviewing applications, but only after the humans in the loop part of the process, not as a replacement of that. And then I like it for, some of the more basic things like getting feedback on the candidate experience, whether they were or weren't hired. I think that's a really effective way to leverage automation, feedback in general. Another area that I won't use AI for, at least not the way it is now, is delivering feedback, whether someone's, like in the case that someone's not moving forward. Sure, it's beneficial to maybe take the raw feedback and make it a little bit more candidate facing, but only a human can deliver that in a way that's going to say, hey, this is like still a good candidate experience, or hey, this was still a good employer branding experience. Like my goal is always, if I'm delivering feedback, that they still feel like they were seen, heard, and valued during the process.
Seen, heard, and valued, the way you just said it sounds practiced. Is that how you frame your feedback from candidates and the experience across those three indices?
Yeah, I think that is the thing that I root it to, acknowledging and seeing them for the value that they did bring to the table. Because, like, everyone's bringing some kind of value to the table. Maybe it's not the value that we need today, but right, they have something to share, to offer, to give. Genuinely, I think that people who get that call just immediately feel more seen and valued as a human because they're being treated like one. Where I think that suffers is when they get an automated canned email after they had 3 rounds of interviews. That's not a great use of an AI tool. And I get it. I get why someone would use that. Time is a finite resource to navigate. But if you care about employer brand and candidate experience, you have to prioritize that.
When you think about scaling a company through an IPO, what is essential in the hiring process versus what is just inherited habit?
I think early on, there's a lot more appetite for having an open mind and hiring for, who you are at that stage of an organization. I think that we were really successful in the past at scaling so quickly because we knew who we were and what we had to offer people, and we could stay grounded in that, but we weren't married to a certain process or a certain way of working. And I think the lack of process was what made us so effective at moving quickly. And then you learn that there is benefit to process and structure after you get to a certain amount of people. And I would say that's like 50 plus. And so then you start to figure out a way to implement process based on what's worked so far, like time to fill and how many interviews we need in order to understand if we like somebody. And we've tried different ways of vetting their technical skills. All of that feeds into the process as you grow. And also just the recognition that the more structure you have, the more equitable you are in your hiring, which is super important. And then I think figuring out who decisions lie with early on, the recruiter and the CEO are probably working together a lot. And then it's the recruiter and the hiring managers. And is the recruiter part of driving the decision, or are they just supporting it? Is it all the hiring manager? If the recruiter says, I don't think we should hire this person, is it ultimately up to the hiring manager, or is it a combined process? So I think being really clear on the decision-making process and how it shifts as you grow and scale so that you can continue to move and not be bogged down by something like that. Also, like the more your talent team grows, making sure that we're not all doing such different things that we aren't staying grounded in the things that matter. And so regularly connecting and making sure that like you've trained your team effectively and like seen them in the process. Because it's one thing to interview somebody and like them in an interview process. It's another thing to see how they interview people and welcome people and reject people and reach out to them. And I love a company that's less about finding someone who exactly fits a job description and more a company that has the appetite to hire for potential. And I think that I have personally seen that be such an effective way to build culture and scale a company. It's not looking for Goldilocks. It's not looking for the perfect situation. It's, can they help us right now? Do they have connection to our values and what we're doing? And do they have enough of the skills to be effective in week 1, month 1, first 90 days. I think early on, it's all about spreadsheets and conversations. And then you get to a point where you recognize you've outgrown the spreadsheets. You want to use tools. And tools are great, but only to an extent. Like you don't want to be bogged down by them or have too many where it's no longer effective.
Life is too short not to work on cool problems with interesting people. Recruiting has taught me that the world is much smaller than we think. I love the serendipity that comes through recruiting for a decade and these amazing moments that we get to create for candidates. I never lose sight of the fact that when we're making an offer call, it's a major life decision. A lot of us have experienced layoffs or corporate downsizing, startups that didn't take off. There's a resilience that builds through individuals' careers, including recruiters. How do you think about those skills that make recruiters great today?
I think some skills that make a recruiter great today, definitely curiosity always comes to mind. I think you have to stay curious to be good at what you do. You have to be someone that double clicks on a question. You don't just hear an answer and not follow up on it. Someone who has a hunger and a thirst to learn more about somebody and lean in physically. Curiosity and everything that comes with that. Beyond curiosity, I would say someone who's a dot connector and can learn about two different scenarios, a hiring manager or company's need and a candidate's need, and find a way to marry the two in a way that feels natural. I think about somebody who is always learning and reflecting on what they've done in the past, what they've learned in the past. So someone who's, I guess maybe that's self-aware, both from the standpoint of being reflective and learning from the good and the bad, and then also someone who's self-aware about the skills they do and don't have and has an interest to continue to learn and grow. And then I think someone who protects their time and is pragmatic. Like you don't have to reinvent the wheel if something works well for you just because there's a shiny new toy on the block. I think it behooves a lot of us to lean into some of those tools and figure out a way to keep, again, growing and learning and being that much more efficient and effective with our time. And like being able to suss out how you connect with someone is going to be the right use of your time right now. I don't want to say good use because that's different than the right use right now.
Mm.
So those are the skills that I think about someone who's forward looking and honestly, someone who stays you could say resilient or stays positive. A lot of recruiting offers the chance to feel down about stuff, whether it's a prickly personality that you connected with or a tricky hiring team, but you just had to stay focused on the task at hand or on the prize. Keep going and understand that's the reality of recruiting, but that's also what makes the highs so high.
When you say how a recruiter protects their time, to me, I hear how a recruiter learns to say no.
Mm-hmm.
And when I think about embracing that conflict, the ability to build the muscle around saying no, it leads to how do you manage a stakeholder? How do we use data? How do we use better tooling at our fingertips, things like dashboards and communication channels in the modern workplace that allow recruiters to be more of a strategic advisor? How do you think recruiters are able to use data today to leverage their hiring managers?
Well, I think it's really important to leverage data in the conversation of compensation. I mean, compensation really makes or breaks a process and how speedy it is, how efficient it is, and how effective it is. I think it impacts quality of hire and it also impacts speed. So I think being able to have a finger on the pulse of what compensation looks like for a given role is a really effective way to share data with a hiring manager and help them understand, well, hey, like if you don't have flexibility on that, what else might you have flexibility on? Or what else might you offer instead of that or in addition to that? I think data around what candidates, what people, what the population is interested in from like a remote versus on-site versus hybrid situation. I think data around compensation, data around what candidates want from a where they work standpoint, and what's important to them. And I think that goes back to recruiters listening, not to just like hear what they want to hear, but to really understand the full picture and then feed that to hiring managers and say, here's what the market is realistically expecting in a role like this. Even like leveraging ENPS scores, if you have data to that, or if you have access to that data. Super effective way to share insights with hiring managers. The hiring managers always want to know about time to fill, and I think putting together SLAs that are meaningful to them. Like sometimes a hiring manager will say, I'm not in a rush. It doesn't matter when we fill this role. I have all the time in the world. I think that tells you a lot about what the hiring process is going to look like compared to a hiring manager that says, let's make it a 21-day process. Understanding the full picture of the tech scene, of the hiring world, and being able to speak to that, I think is going to show you it's going to prove your value that much more to a hiring manager. I got to do my homework and make sure I know what's going on in my world so that I can speak to that in an effective way that is valuable. But I also think you need to know what's valuable to the hiring manager before you start just sharing data with them and, ribbon stats. You need to know where they're coming from too.
I love the idea of implementing SLAs. It allows recruiters to kind of stand up a little straighter, take on more accountability. Recruiters should not be afraid of accountability. When I talk to executive leadership teams, there are things I think of that signal if the recruiting function is operating in a healthy way. How do you signal success to leadership teams?
Well, I think it depends on the situation. Like when I'm in an in-house scenario, I really like to solicit feedback from the hiring manager, from the person I hired early and often, consistently throughout their first 6 months, let's call it. That I think right there is one way to tell you if hiring is working. I think another way that we think about it, the amount of days it takes you to submit a candidate. And if you haven't submitted a candidate by X date, then something may be broken or need a little bit of fixing. And I think you learn pretty quickly. Like the market will tell you, is it the comp? Is it the job itself? Is it something else? And so I think having an open dialogue with your hiring managers where you're empowered and valued for sharing that kind of feedback is really important. I mean, everything about hiring is an open dialogue and open communication. The world changes every day, so we get new information every day. But I think just staying close to one another and making sure that they both receive the important information, I think that's a good way to tell if it's working.
You've talked about some metrics that are vital to a healthy recruiting organization. Are there any other metrics that are important to
Yeah.
recruiting teams that are hiring today?
I think definitely the pass-through rate to interviews is a big one. Probably most of us want to focus on quality over quantity, but there are definitely hiring managers who value volume too. I definitely like to look at how many candidates did it take to land an interview. And that's a great indication early on to know if you understand what you're hiring for. So I definitely look at that number. Sourced to interview is a big one. Does it really need to take you 20 conversations to feel ready to submit someone to a hiring manager? Gosh, hopefully not. I look at those early metrics for sure. And then offer acceptance rates I find to be very telling as well. And I think it goes back to how well you understood both your candidate and your hiring manager. And if you didn't, you may very well end up with a ratio at the end of your process that you're not happy with.
If you were rebuilding a recruiting function from scratch, what would you do today that might be different from a few years ago?
The thing about recruiting that can be challenging is when you're not talking about what you're learning, what's working for you, what's not along the way. Like I really appreciate that my team connects weekly to talk about that and troubleshoot challenges together. But I would wager that not everyone's doing that. Sometimes you're just too busy to stop and do that. I think it's a great way to both stay clear on what works and also stay learning about your process.
What excites you about the future of recruiting?
Continuing to make an impact in people's lives and seeing if this thing we're trying to do or these companies are trying to do with, let's say, AI is actually going to work by hiring the right people to drive these missions forward. Like so many of my clients today are stepping into a period of experimentation, modernization, and I'm calling it the AI transformation era. The right people are going to tell us if it's going to work. And so I'm just excited to see the evolution of that and these workforces that have this appetite for change and evolution and growth. I'm excited to see our industry continue to trail on an upward trajectory with job openings.
Julianne, when all of this is said and done in life, why will recruiting have been enough for you?
My goal has always been to be a connector and a helper, and my life mantra is to leave places and spaces better than how I found them. The reality is I've taken on all facets of people operations and HR, and I think that gives me such a great understanding of how an organization functions. But I learned that recruiting is the one for me through those experiences. Like for me, I've always been both a connector and a builder. I love and am so energized by both. I've worked with startups my entire career, either telling their stories to the media or building their organizations with people. I've taken on other positions under the people operations umbrella, and I'm grateful for how that afforded me to understand how businesses run and operate and succeed. But at the end of the day, I want to help people find their next great adventure. I want to help people get off the layoff bench. I want to help people make more money and drive change. And that never gets old. The feeling of extending an offer, of knowing that you made it through a tricky process or a long process, or even a short process with an amazing hiring manager that you were just stoked to support. I think knowing that my life goal is to leave places and spaces better than how I found them. Well, how do I do that? I find the right people to improve the spaces and keep them running. And so recruiting has just naturally been where I was drawn to and wanted to stay.
Here's a look at the next episode of the Recruiting Roadshow, brought to you by Greenhouse.
The next guest on the show is Katie Wagner. Katie came out to Denver to talk a little bit about what she calls problem-based recruiting. She operates a firm called Talent by Design Collective, and I appreciate her approach to recruiting as a product. Right now, I just see the levees have broken and recruiters are out there with buckets trying to bail the water.
We're getting pressure from leadership to implement AI, to do more with less.
I think when we fast forward through a lot of this digital transformation through AI, we will see that recruiting is probably going to end up looking a lot more like the way executive search and traditional headhunting has.
A recruiter is going to be a community builder because they're not going to have to spend so much time reviewing resumes.
The most value added as a recruiter is, I think, at the very top of the funnel.
Our job as a recruiter is to understand very deeply of what are the problems that you need to solve, and then let's tailor those skills, experiences, competencies to that problem.
Hiring manager is not going to talk to 15 or 20 people in the future. They're going to talk to 3 to 5.
I really think that we're going to be able to hold recruiting teams more accountable to how they actually perform down the road so that we're hiring the right person.
Empathy is the core of recruiting.
Honestly, it's like the connections that you make.
It's really fulfilling to me because that's like building community.
I think now's our moment.